Hi everyone. My name is Dennis. I'm a principal at New York VC at UBF Global Ventures. But today I'll be presenting doing a webinar on market sizing, and it's solely my initiative. So all the opinions are my opinions rather than the company ones. Yeah, and before we start, I'd like to briefly introduce myself. So I've been in the VC for the last 6 years, and prior to joining to VC, I worked as a sales in a corporate. I worked also as a risk management analyst, and I have an engineering background. So I was a rocket scientist. I was going to build rockets back then in 2007. Yeah, and in 2012 and 2013, I also had experience of building and actually failing my own startup. We were doing a marketplace for outdoor advertising. I believe that I learned a lot from this experience. And now I'm an expert in so-called Industry 4.0, I say it, IoT, robotics, augmented virtual reality, machine learning, SaaS, and whatsoever. I like when the startups applied to transform boring and unsexy industries like construction, manufacturing, logistics, you name it. And over my career, I participated in numerous deals, both in the United States and in emerging countries. And this is actually why I do these webinars, because I try to support entrepreneurs in emerging countries and bring the knowledge, bring the gap of knowledge and experience in those regions mainly. Yeah, and the first topic I would like to talk to you today is how to calculate the total addressable market. I believe there is a lot of information in the internet and the case studies, but it's always good to have it, put it all in one place. We will see some qualitative methods and reasoning around it, and as well as some quantitative methods and concrete examples later on. But the first thing I would like to start from is that a startup market, a market which any of you guys are attacking, is a market which is experienced quite high risks and uncertainty. And those of you who know, who had some masters in finances or economics, typically have encountered this risk return curve. The risk return curve means that the higher the risk, so the higher the probability of failing or losing money, the higher the expected returns. And we in VC deal with startups with a very high risk profile. And this high risk profile results in potential high returns. And those high risks are oftentimes associated with the high uncertainty or with regards to the market size in general. And this is why when you're doing forecasting for markets, for mature markets like FMCG, air travel, and so ever, your forecasts are much more accurate rather than in cases of startup markets. And here is an example. All of you know VR, I've heard of it at least once. But maybe not all of you know that this is the fourth reincarnation of virtual reality. And the first three attempts failed due to various reasons. It was pricey, it was not market or technology ready. And it happens all the times in various markets. And sometimes startups die because, they are ahead of their time. Yeah, so next thing I would like to talk is, suppose you have a brilliant idea for a startup. what should you do first? I believe that you first of all, you need to double check on the size of the market. And I've read this lecture for a couple of events, and I asked people why this topic is interesting for them. And here are the answers they give. Most of these answers are reasonable, but the last two of them are very warning. The first one is I would like to negotiate the market size with a VC. It's actually, you don't negotiate this market size with a VC. VC either believes in it or not. That's it. So you actually evaluate the market size to understand for yourself: is there a big opportunity? Is there a $1 billion market opportunity? And the other warning sign is that a person, a founder, has already put together a pitch deck, and the only slide he has is this market size. Guys, what will you do if your market size is really narrow? You will never raise money. So you'd better first understand the market size and do some first traction, and then you put together a pitch deck, because pitch deck is a marketing material if you think about it. Okay, let's move on. So one thing most of you know is this product life cycle. It was first introduced by Jeffrey Moore, but the idea behind it is that all the clients are actually different, and there are some early adopters, there are some early majority, there are late majority. But when we talk about startups, it's very important to understand that when you start to sell your product, you start to deal with those geeks or those early adopters, and these people are very different from the early majority. And this early majority will bring you a big business. So when you're doing, when you're at the end stage or at an early stage, you're mainly dealing with the early adopters, and there is a chasm. There is a big chance you fail and you wouldn't succeed to get to the early majority. And when you get to the early majority, you actually raise Series A, B, and so ever, go to the IPO. And this is actually the reason a lot of seed startups fail. Okay. The other thing a lot of startups don't understand is that according to microeconomics, the most profitable business model is monopoly. But it's actually a mathematic model. But what it means, if you differentiate a lot, then you can, and if you have high barriers to entry or it takes a lot of time or effort to replicate your solution, it means that you can charge extras. And on the contrary, if you have, if you're doing one of this 10 or 20 similar products, the margins in the long run will be zero. And it's called perfect competition. And this is why when you're looking for a market, think also about the barriers to entry. And it's a very bad pitch for a VC to say, the market is so big that we'll find the place on it. Okay. Another thing I would like to talk about is maybe some of you know about these Porter's five forces, but typically consultants use this to analyze the more mature markets. But it's also very useful for us to understand how it works. So there are several forces which actually drive the margins on our market. So the first force is bargaining power of the buyers. It means that if your customer can easily switch between the various providers, your margins will go down, and it could be next to zero. And for example, if you have a delivery food service or a car sharing service or a kick sharing service, and those switches are insignificant, then you as a user can see, okay, here is the cheapest one. If there is no other difference between them, I'll take the cheapest one. And you should, when you choose the market, you should understand if you can differentiate and lock your client. Another force is bargaining power of suppliers. Suppose you're doing some plugin solution or some SaaS solution which works exclusively with Facebook data, and you heavily rely on it. It's in this case, the whole your business depends on it, and if Facebook, for example, blocks you for some reason, you will die eventually. And if you're if you have a higher concentration on your providers, a revenue concentration on your provider, those providers can have a negotiating power, and they can actually take most of your margin. So this is another thing to think about when you choose a market. Another threat is the threat of the substitutes. Sometimes you compete not only, oftentimes actually, you compete not only with the direct solutions like yours, but also with the substitutes. For example, you're doing a delivery service for foods from restaurants, and your substitute is do-it-yourself food meals. And if switching between these alternatives is really simple for your clients, then this cannibalization will also drive your margins down. The fourth force is the threat of the entrance of the new players, the replicas. And here is an example. A friend of mine was traveling to China and talking to people doing kick sharing services. And he was a guide showed him 3 streets with the offices where were offices of kick sharing startups. You can imagine how competitive the market was, but most of them were swept away due to this high competition. And the fifth market force is industry rivalry. So you enter the market, you should double check. Do you have, number one player which holds more than 50% of the market? If it is the case, how are you going to overcompete them? In most cases, when you have a number one player holding the majority of the market, and they typically have a strong brand, and this strong brand drives their customer acquisition cost low, while in contrast you will have high customer acquisition cost, and you can charge you will give discounts to your product to enter the market, and your margins will go down. So these are the forces you need to account for when you choose the idea and you choose the market you would like to address. Another thing to understand is how your end customer thinks. What topics are on his agenda right now? And for example, I had experience working with car sharing companies, and here is the breakdown of their costs. And as you see on the graph, the most of their costs are coming from fuel consumption and amortization and depreciation. And if, for example, you're doing an insurance tech startup for car sharing, you should think that you should be aware that this is only 3% of their costs, and maybe your clients have bigger topics to discuss, like maybe they are focused on optimizing fuel consumption or optimizing their amortization and depreciation. So if you're addressing a small a small percentage of this cost structure, you make sure the company has a dedicated department, or at least a person inside who is in charge of optimizing this cost. Another thing to understand that, okay, for example, your client has annual revenue, $100 million in annual revenue. You can save them, say, you address the cost of $3 million. For example, you can save them up to 20% of this $3 million. So you will save them annually around 600K. And there is a rule of thumb that you can only charge around 10% of the amount saved. So this means that in this case, you can charge them as much as 60K annually. And in this case, for example, your client has a dedicated department and person in charge of optimizing this cost, and they will use your solution. In this case, you need to be sure that there are a lot of companies like this, and you have a lot of clients. Okay, another thing you need to keep in mind is understand the macroeconomic trends. You would like to understand if the status quo could exist for a long time, or there are some forces which push to adopt solutions like yours. And here is an example. In the United States, even prior COVID, there were two trends in restaurant business. The first one is that the costs of the labor were growing. They were indexed every year. But on the other hand, the price for the product for the meals wasn't growing because of the high competition, and it means that the margin was significantly decreasing year over year, and it means that in the long run, any solution which improves profitability of this business will have a chance to become reality. And if you're doing business for a restaurant, double check that you improve the margins for them. Okay. Another good framework for you is strategic canvas. It was first introduced in the book Blue Ocean, and the idea is the following. You think of your direct and indirect competitors and the second best alternatives on the market. And you try to understand what are the value propositions those solutions provide to your potential clients, and try to understand how you can significantly improve it. Here is an example. This example was cited in the book, and the book is actually a really good one. I strongly advise to read it. So there was a company, Yellowtail. They were producing wine. It's an Australian company, and they were going to enter the US market. And the situation on the market was that there were premium wines and there were budget wines on the market. But in general, there were a lot of brands, and most of them positioned themselves as, you know, the best, or, you know, very specific wine. And you actually should understand a lot of those terms, and they put a lot of money and effort in marketing on one side. And on the other hand, they had to invest heavily in storing the wine. And these two things drew their costs up and their margins down. So when if you put together a strategic canvas for this Yellowtail company, you will understand that you can overcompete them if you change your product a little bit. And first of all, they understood that there are a lot of people which would just like to drink an ordinary you know, beer or some simple some simple drink. And maybe you need this drink shouldn't be 3 years old or something. And on the other hand, those people believed that that wine is not for them. They need a simpler product. So Yellowtail positioned them not as a winery, but as a wine drink. And they did a very small assortment. They did a good looking bottle, and they put together it and focused more on younger people or you know, people who drink beer. And here you can see how the value proposition of Yellowtail differentiates from the value proposition of other players on the market. Uh, they actually introduced several more items on which they competed. Yeah. We discussed a little bit some qualitative approaches to how you could think of the market before we start quantitative analysis. And here I would like to tell you a joke, a VC joke. Suppose a VC was lucky and he died and got to heaven. He looks around and sees a lot of people there. Then he comes to an angel and says, "Give me a microphone." The angel gives him a microphone, and the VC says, "Breaking news! Attention to everybody! There is a unique investment opportunity in the 7th section of the hell, and half of the people are running away." Then the VC stands idle for a while, and then also runs after them. And the angel cries out to him, "Why you run? You made it up." And the VC answers, "You never know. Maybe there is really a good investment opportunity." This joke actually demonstrates that since no one in our field, no one knows the future, and this future is you know, the uncertainty is really high. You rely heavily on the market signals, and those market signals couldn't be sometimes could be wrong. Okay. Let's talk about the qualitative methods for analysis. So typically, when I or any of you start to explore the market, I believe you try to Google something. And you can Google something like global RPA market size in 2019. And maybe you're lucky and you get a Gartner report reporting this big number. But in most cases, you're not that lucky, and you won't find any report saying how big is your market. And even with the RPA, the situation is that there are a lot of big players on the market, and you will need to look for a niche. For example, for small medium businesses, for a specific niche for finances or something. And in this case, you don't have, even if you have a big the estimate of this market size in general, you don't have an estimate for your particular niche. Let's talk about some methods how we can calculate your niche market size. So actually, the idea is really simple. It's called decomposition method. So if you can't, if you don't know exactly the number, the exact number of for the given market, you can decompose it and write down it as a multiple of several other variables, and those variables you can assess more reliably. For example, you're having an e-commerce shop, And your revenue is could be broken down as website traffic multiplied by the conversion rate, multiplied by the average check. And very important things to understand for you right now is first, those numbers in this decomposition typically are much more easily to assess from your common sense, or maybe market research, or getting these numbers from from experts. And also, in most of the cases, you need to assess only one or two multiples, while most of the others are always known, or already known to you. Another thing to understand is actually you don't need the exact number. You need a range, and oftentimes a range lower, where the real number lies with 90% certainty is really good for your task. And good news for you is you can randomly ask 5 people, and it's important that you ask them randomly. And you can very reliably assess this number. You can, you can improve this assessment later on, but oftentimes you can do very simple calculations very fast. And also you should know that an expert in a field, they have a gut feeling. And if this expert does calibrate, does assessments according to his gut feeling, his or her gut feeling, they oftentimes do it pretty good. We shall see the examples later on. And also, you need to understand, when you assess the market size for a startup, the error of 30, even 50% is quite good. Because, as I said, we deal with very high uncertainties. Okay, and the last thing you need to understand is sometimes you can measure the market size more precisely, but this procedure would be costly, very costly to you. For example, you can ask any person in a country about his intent of buying something, but it will cost you money. And you can, ask a very small amount of people and give less accurate result, but but accuracy will be good enough to serve your purpose. So not overcomplicate your estimates sometimes. Here is a good example for you. I believe prior COVID, most of you at least once did air travel, and most of you were in Boeing 737. And if I ask you how long is the wingspan of this airplane, you will give some numbers. We won't do this exercise, but some of you will say that it's 30 meters, others will say it's 40 meters, others will say it's 15 meters. And the real number is 35 meters. But I hardly doubt that any of you will say that it's 2 meters long, or it's 1 kilometer long, or even 200 meters long. And this is the case when this is the case how actually calibrated experts work. From your personal experience, when you work in a given market, your gut feeling works pretty well. Another example is, for example, you would like to build some solution to optimize the route or time spent for the commute to your employees, to an employee in your company. And to get this number, you can actually randomly ask 5 of your employees, and you will get upper and lower range. And oftentimes it will fluctuate between, I don't know, 30 minutes and an hour, 30 minutes and an hour and a half. But none of your employees will say that he or she spends 5 hours to commute. Okay, we also, I believe most of you know and have at least once seen this graph. Yes, TAM, SAM, SOM. So, but for those who don't know, total addressable market is the number of the people who need the product, but some of them can't even buy it. And here is an example for you. Suppose we are building a theater in a small town. All the people from 2 to 85 years who hypothetically could go to this theater could be the potential clients. If we talk about serviceable addressable market, it's actually the total spending on this to serving this need in the given on the given market right now. And in case of the theater, it's all the tickets sold in a given town. And the last one is share of the market. So it's how much could you earn on it, and with your existing business model. And for the for the theater, it would be, you know, the maximum number of the tickets you could physically sell because of the, you know, physical limitations of the number of chairs in the theater. Yeah, and I would also stress that a lot of people think that they found total addressable market, but they actually put some really big number, like, you know, the total number of all the cars sold in the United States. It's not the total addressable market. It's called potential addressable market, but really for the purpose of the fundraising, it's just a huge number, which is not relevant to your market most of the time. Okay, and here are a couple of typical mistakes how people do it wrong in their pitch presentation. The first one, for example, people are doing a startup is developing a solution, IoT solution for agricultural equipment. And they say, okay, the global IoT market size is, you know, $200 billion or so. We will take 2% of this market, so it's $4 billion. And our serviceable addressable market would be 20%, so it's $800 million. So the market is big enough, and we can do, like, build a $1 billion company on that. And maybe you end up to be right in your estimates, but in this bottom-up approach, you don't reliably you can't reliably understand and assess how many clients exist on your market. Yeah, and I always advise to do a bottom-up approach, and we will see it down the road. And another you know, bad example is when people say, okay, we're developing the auto accessories, but the global market size of car industry market size is $4 trillion. We take 0.1% of this market, and we end up in $4 billion. It's a really bad example. Let's look at some good examples. I've spent a lot of time living in Moscow and traveling on Moscow subway, and it's actually a really good one compared to subways in other cities. And let's try to assess how many you know, carriages are there in the Moscow metro. So we can actually calculate all these numbers from our day-to-day experience. First, we look at the map and we see that there are 14 subway lines. Then we know that typically we can travel like 1 hour to get from one end of the line to the other. We also, from the personal experience, know that there are around 10 carriages in a train. And we also understand that the maximum number of the carriages we can see on the lines is during the rush hours. and it's typically around 1.5 minutes between the trains. And we also know that trains move in two directions. And we can also reasonably suggest that there is some reserve, the reserve for repairs and replacement, and we shall take it like 10% reserve. So if we multiply all these numbers, we can end up in the assessment of in the estimate of 12,000 carriages in the subway. And let's go to the market. Let's go to the website of the official website, and we see that the actual number is around 6,000 carriages. And on one hand, it's quite a mistake. But on the other hand, we didn't end up in 50,000 or 400,000 carriages. So so we are quite close to the real number. And let's also look how we could improve on that. First of all, if you look at the map, we see that some of the lines are really short, and only 10 of the lines are more or less long. And on the other hand, from our personal experience, we say that the minimum number of the minimum time between the trains is only 1.5 minutes, but in general, it's something like around 2 minutes. And if we if we adjust on these premises, we will end up in 6,000 carriages, which is really close to the number. Another example, I was given it given this lecture in Samara once, and okay, let's calculate the size of the haircut market in Samara. And we don't know actually the actual number, but we can do some suggestions. First of all, we know the population of the city. Also, we believe that more or less it's equally split between men and women. And we also can reasonably suggest that like people from 7 to 60 years old, they go to barber shops. And we also know the lifespan, the average lifespan in the city or in the country. And from personal experience, how much does the haircut cost? And we also know that you know, men have their hair cut like each month, while women, for example, go to the barbershop every three months. And from these numbers, we can estimate the average market size of the market. So what it means for us, that the total annual market is around $60 million. And it means that if we are aiming to build a business doing $3 or $6 million annually, it's a doable task. But if you would like to build a business doing $30 million or $60 million, it means that we need to monopolize the market, and it's a very hard task to do. Another example for you is SaaS solution for content marketers in the United States. How we can assess the total addressable market for these companies? First thing we can do is go to the official government statistics, and find out how many of the businesses are there in the US. Maybe some breakdowns or on some relevant parameters. And in this case, we just found the breakdown of the companies by the size of the company, by the headcount of the company. And the first thing we know is 90% of the content marketers companies are using content marketing. Another thing we know that 53% of those content marketing professionals have only one content marketing team member. Also, we know that 76% of content marketing professionals would like to improve their productivity because they have a lot on their plate. What else we know? That, for example, the service is going to charge $100 per month per employee. And we also know the number of the companies. We believe that, talking with experts, we believe that companies with 500 plus headcounts have three content marketers, while other companies with a smaller size have one content marketer, and we know the number of these companies. We can do easy calculations for each of the for two of these segments, and we can end up in $300 million market. So this means that we can easily build a SaaS business with $10 million or $20 million in annual revenue. But to build a business with $100 million revenue, it would be a tough task, because we will take 30% of the market. And in this case, we need to think what markets are we going to expand, or maybe what out-of-the-pocket expenses of this given of your potential clients you could also charge to get to the bigger market. Okay, another example is coming from Latin America. For example, we would like to build a SaaS for utility services in Latin America, across all the Latin America. We don't even know exactly how many companies are there. But what we know is, first of all, we were lucky and we found that there are 400,000 companies in Brazil. But we can reasonably suggest that those utility services are more or less proportional to the population of the country. And so we know the population of each country, and we can assess the number proportionally, the number of those utility companies in any country, in other countries. Other thing we can know is GDP per capita, and that will show us which companies are richer, which companies have a lower income, and can slightly adjust our monthly subscription. For example, for some countries it would be $50, for other countries it would be $60. Another thing we should think about is, do SMBs already use SaaS in Latin America? And we can Google a little bit and find out that 92% of companies actually list at least one SaaS service. And we also could ask ourselves, how big is SaaS market in Latin America in general? And we can find a number that it was $1.5 billion in 2017, and it was growing intensely. And if we look at this assessment, this market will reach $5 and $6 billion in 2023. So if our assessment will be of our market, SaaS market for utility services would be more than $6 billion or even $1 billion, we will need to think about what is unique about this proposition that so that we grab this this big share of the market, or maybe we made a mistake in our calculation. So how we can do the calculations? It's also very easy. You see the numbers, you just multiply and add them, and you see that the total addressable market for the services like that is around $500 million. And it means that if you have a penetration of 5 to 10% of the market, you can easily build a company with a revenue of $20 or $50 million. Okay, another example is coming from marketplaces for B2C. Marketplaces are unique in the instance is that they have very strong network effects, and in most of the niches you know, there are not that many players who hold the majority of the market, and other players, they, you know, you can neglect them. You can say that they don't hold any meaningful size of the market. And for example, this marketplace sells some services for B2C clients. We were lucky, for example, and one of the 6 players which we identified had is a public company. We know their headcount and we know their revenue. But how to assess the others? Here are 3 examples. The first one is, okay, let's go to LinkedIn, and fortunately for SaaS businesses, and not only for SaaS businesses, but for many IT companies, for startups, the headcount in LinkedIn is very close to the real number of workers in a company. And you can reasonably assess that revenue per employee is more or less equal for most of the players in the same region with the same business model. So you can you can just estimate a revenue as proportional to the headcount of the company. Also, you can suggest that you can go to the similar web and see the monthly visits of each of the companies. And you can also assess the market size proportional to the monthly visits, suggesting that the conversion rate is similar. And you can also estimate it more granularly, like decomposing it as a website visits multiplied by conversion rate, multiplied by the average ticket size, and you will end up with another number. But what is important in this case is that most of the numbers, all the 3 methods, give us the estimate of the total market size between $1 billion and $1.4 billion. Another example is coming from my startup. We were doing outdoor advertising marketplace, and let's assess the market in our case. So the total market for outdoors advertising was growing with CAGR every year for 10%. And the total market size for these services was $700 million. The other fact is that there were 63,000 billboards, but the number was decreasing year over year. We also, based on the competitor analysis and talking to the people on the market, we know that you typically charge around $250 per billboard per month. And we also know that there are 2 big players. One holds 60%, 50% of the market, and another one holds 25% of the market. And since we're doing a marketplace for which was focusing mostly on smaller players, it meant that we could our total addressable market was only 18,000 of the rest of the billboards. And we can reasonably suggest that we can charge like between 10 and 20% commission for our services. We also know that there are 2 other players working in the same space. And taking those numbers and just multiplying them, we see that the total market size for this service was around $5 million. And it means that you can build a lifestyle business on a market like this, but you will never raise money for it. Or you need to expand your value proposition. You either become an agency, or you expand to other types of advertising. So these are the things you need to think about when if you end up in a small market. And another example is actually CRM for VCs. I've seen a lot of them because people are pitching me, trying to sell me to use CRM dedicated, best in class for VCs. But if you, let's try to assess the total addressable market. The premise is most of VCs actually have profile and link at LinkedIn, and you can search how many of them are there. And actually, the penetration of LinkedIn in white-collar professions is, close to 90%. So most of these assessments for white-collar workers are really reliable, especially in Western countries. So I did a small search by using a couple of keywords, and I ended up in 600,000 employees working globally in this field. And given that the market, given that we charge $50 to $100 per employee per month, we can end up in the total addressable market between 400 million and 700 million dollars. So even based on this assessment, the size of the market is lower than $1 billion. You can also assess the market size other way. You can go to Crunchbase and look how many profiles of VCs are there globally. And you will see the number of 17,000 VCs globally. If you suggest that an average size of the VC is around 10 employees, you will end up in 170 people working in the industry. And this will give you around 100 or $200 million total addressable market. And if you look at the solutions in the market, you will see that standalone SaaS solutions for VCs are not that reliable. People actually sell services on top of that. Many companies like Crunchbase or PitchBook. For example, Crunchbase expanded, they're not doing SaaS, CRM, but they're doing a solution for the database of startups. They expanded to other fields. They address not only VCs, but also salesperson, also startuppers. So they expanded their potential target market. While, for example, PitchBook or Traxon, they attack mostly VCs and private equity, but they sell not only CRM, most of them have CRM built in, but also services like advanced search of startups and something like that. So they try to increase their average tickets, bringing more value. And the last idea to you, how could you also assess other markets? You can. I've seen people, some people just parsing all the relevant websites in their industry. For example, you can parse the list of all construction sites in the US, and you can assess how many of them are open every year. You can find in some services, you can find app installment base of your competitors. You can look for monthly relevant requests in Google, which people are looking for solution like you, and it will give you not the total addressable market, it will give you the idea for serviceable addressable market. But still, it's the number which could help you out to reasonably assess your market size. And you also can, check if you have a, marketplace in your field or some other relevant service where most of your players are potential clients are listed. You can also check the user base of those services. Okay, and the final word to you today is, all make mistakes, I've been tracking VR market for around 5 years now, and I've been reading this reports and forecasts for the market size for many years, and these forecasts were given by respectable agencies. And you will see, for example, that you see on the graph that in 2017 the market size was around 14 billions, while in 2018 it was only 8.9 billion. And I assure you, none of the agencies forecasted this significant drop. And another example is it's quite a famous case of economist de Moderan, who significantly undervalued the potential market size for Uber. And his premises were actually based on the idea that Uber will convert the existing taxi driver market. But his assessment, his estimate was 10 times lower than the reality, because actually business model of Uber transformed the industry, and there emerged a lot of players, individual taxi drivers doing a part-time job or full-time job, and even so so what I would like to say is that even big and respectable experts in our field, they can make mistakes, and that's okay. So guys, I told everything I would like to share with you today. We can spend some time for answering your questions. And anyway, if you at some point would like to talk in person, please feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn or Facebook. Actually, I use my Facebook for professionals purposes only. Yeah, and I hope that it was useful for you today. And I'll spend some time to answer some of your questions. Bianca, what book did you mean? There were two books actually. One book is Blue Ocean, and there is another book by Jeffrey Moore, is Breaking the Chasm or something like that. But anyway, if you ping me via LinkedIn, I will send you the links to the books, and I hope you will find them, because they are very well known. Does any of you have any other questions to me? Okay, I'll wait for a minute or something. If no questions arise, so then we can wrap up for today. How useful do you find Google search request statistics? I believe it's really useful. It's more like a sum rather than Tom. But anyway, you need to think about you're eventually you're going to sell something to your clients, and you would like to reach out to them. And Google search in this case tells you how many people are asking Google, are looking for the solution in Google. Yeah, and if you're going to sell it through content through the marketing, the direct marketing at Google, you should at least understand how many people are searching it, because if this number is small, it means that you will need to reach out to your clients through other channels. For example, you can advertise on TV, and I'm not sure if any of you remember that, but back in 2000, people like Google search engines in emerging countries, they were actually given advertising on TV and on outdoor advertising to to encourage people to use something. So I believe that Google search requests could be helpful. It's not, the mantra, and the number of the searches could grow. And actually, the month, if this the interest, this monthly requests are growing, it will signal that for some reason people are converting, are looking for the solution. Either they are looking it for online, because they started to more advanced in using digital technology, or maybe they started to use it to look for solution like that in general. I hope the answer was helpful. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Uh, is it possible to calculate sum based on the Google search request? It depends. It depends how you sell your solution. For example, if you're it will give you an indication, but I believe no, no, it's not. You should account for other channels. For example, maybe you're selling, maybe in many cases your solution is just sticky. For example, you install Uber app once, you will never search it again, but still you use it really often. And to calculate the market size for some mobile app, you better rely on installment base of the top players in your category or something like that. Or you can reasonably assess, for example, if a person uses a service like that, he or she will use it once a month, 3 times a week, or something like that. So in some cases, Google search is a good indication. In other cases, is less indication. It depends on how it depends on your business model and how and customer journey of your clients. How would you proceed to calculate the market size for an application that uses blockchain technology to certify to certify certificates offered by a university? You should not assess the blockchain the market for the blockchain technology. You should assess the number of those certificates globally, which you have annually, and reasonably suggest some percent then penetration of your technology, like maybe 5% or 10% of the market, and reasonably assess the average amount you can charge your clients, and also think about, okay, I will charge them this much for my solution, but you need also to benchmark how much do they spend on this right now, what are the alternatives, because if you charge them really high, like 10 times higher than they spend on this now, it will be tricky for them to buy. And if you charge them like 10 times cheaper than, or maybe exact the same amount they have now, but provide much better experience in one sense, that would be a good estimate. I hope the answer was helpful. Okay. Okay, Andrew. If we sum up website traffic of our competitors in some particular country, can we use this number as a current market volume? If you believe that there are no other competitors, meaningful competitors, I believe that could be a good estimate, like in the case with marketplaces. But in some cases, some markets are structured that way that you have, tons of small players, and each of small players I can have like, 1,000 visitors per month, and there are thousands, millions of users like that. So it depends the market concentration depends on the market concentration and market structure. Andrew, it's a more specific question. Perhaps you can follow up or send a follow-up email, or it's better, it would be better if you reach out to me in Facebook and we will discuss this, because there should be a lot of premises done. Okay? You're welcome. So I believe we need to wrap up today. If you need something on my end, please feel free to reach out to me. And it was a pleasure hosting you today, and hope we will meet later on. Okay, guys, good luck. Bye.